The city skyline was glowing, and from the floor-to-ceiling windows of my studio, I could see the harbor gleaming under the evening light. That view was the crown jewel of my career, years of work transforming a decaying industrial waterfront into something vibrant and alive. That harbor was mine. The city loved it. Investors lined up for it. And I stood here alone, still tweaking zoning overlays and variance notes long after everyone else had gone home. Behind me, I heard the familiar click of heels. "You're still working?" Maris said, stepping in with a wine glass. She wore one of her sleek wrap dresses, probably fresh from a gallery event I forgot we RSVP'd to. "It's a zoning thing. Midfield lot, third phase," I said without turning. "It's turning into a jurisdictional pissing match. I've got to get ahead of it." She took a sip of her wine and leaned against the drafting table like she was bored of this whole act. "You've been saying that every night this week. You're married to zoning now." I glanced over at her, already weary. "We close this deal, we break ground on a whole new contract with the city. You know that." Maris waved a hand lazily. Sure. Just don't forget, Quinn needs those ownership documents signed." He said it's urgent, some adjustment for the development partnership. "You remember, right?" "I'll get to it," I said. "Zoning first." She gave a tight smile and turned to leave. "Don't stay too late." And just like that, she was gone. The door clicked shut behind her. I stood still for a moment. Then I returned to my screen and hit refresh. Felix had said he was sending something. "Trust me," he texted. "You need to see this tonight." When the file landed, I opened it without hesitation. Grainy footage lit up my screen, time-stamped and steady. It was Quinn's apartment building, upscale and modern, tucked into the hills. The lobby camera caught Maris stepping in through the glass doors. She was smiling. Quinn met her at the elevator. No handshake. He kissed her. Not quickly. Not like it was the first time. I let it play. My stomach didn't drop. My jaw didn't clench. None of that. I just watched. Like I was watching someone else's life fall apart. They entered the elevator together, hands linked. I sat down slowly, the leather creaking under me. There was no anger, not yet. No shock either. Just a quiet, spreading recognition that what I'd suspected, what I didn't want to name, had just arrived like a wrecking ball. My wife, my lawyer, my project, all intertwined, all betraying me. I played the footage again. This time, I didn't blink. I studied every frame like it was a blueprint, because something had just broken, and I needed to know exactly how deep the fault line ran. And I needed a plan. We met at Leo's diner just after midnight. It was one of those places where the booths were cracked, the coffee was burnt, and the staff didn't ask questions. The kind of place Felix and I used to hit after pulling all-nighters back in architecture school, sketching napkin mock-ups of buildings we thought would change the world. Now we were older. Now the napkins were evidence. Felix slid into the booth across from me, his phone already in hand. He looked around the empty space and leaned in. "It's worse than you think," he said without even saying hello. I didn't respond. Just waited. He tapped a few times and pulled up longer footage. Quinn's apartment again, more than one visit now. Same routine. Maris coming and going like it was home. One clip showed them in the underground garage. Quinn opened the passenger door for her like he was showing off a trophy. "How long?" I asked quietly. "About 6 months. Maybe longer," Felix replied. "And there's more." I started digging after I got the footage. He handed me a manila envelope. Inside were printouts, account transfers, company names I didn't recognize, wire instructions. All of them tied back to one familiar routing number, my joint account with Maris. "What the hell is this?" "Shell companies," Felix said, lowering his voice. "Maris has been quietly moving funds. Small enough transfers to fly under audit thresholds, but consistent. I traced 3 dummy LLCs registered out of Nevada. Guess who filed the paperwork?" I didn't answer. I already knew. "Quinn." I ran a hand down my face. I could feel the pressure behind my eyes building, slow and cold like a storm front. "And they're funneling my firm's capital?" Felix nodded. "Most of it's marked as consulting fees from some of your real estate projects. Nothing flagged because the names are generic. The accounts just barely sit outside your business audit lanes. Legal, on paper, if you're not paying attention." I stared at the papers, then up at Felix. "You remember Tomas Rivera?" he asked. "Real estate guy from Branton?" I said. "The one who tried to rig that coastal development auction?" "Yeah." Quinn was his attorney. "You exposed Rivera 2 years ago. Crushed his bid and tanked his entire deal. And now Quinn's sleeping with my wife and bleeding my accounts," I muttered. Felix nodded. "This isn't just personal. They're positioning themselves to take over. I dug up drafts of legal filings they haven't submitted yet. Preliminary divorce paperwork. A motion to seize partial control of your firm. They think I'll roll over, I said. They're counting on it. I sat back, still holding the envelope. My hands didn't shake, but something underneath the surface of my chest twisted and locked up. I had built everything from the ground up. My firm, my rep, the harbor project, and now the two people I trusted most were carving it apart like vultures. They're trying to prove that you and Maris co-managed the company, Felix continued. That she deserves half of the patents, the IP, even partial ownership of your newest green infrastructure project. That one made me flinch. I'd been developing it for 3 years. Modular environmental zones. Eco-forward frameworks for climate-resilient districts. My life's work. The firm's future. They file now, Felix said. They could get a judge to freeze assets. Quinn's already greasing the wheels with a judge out of county, guy named Halsey. I nodded slowly. Every puzzle piece was snapping into place. David, Felix said, finally pausing, they're not just trying to take the firm. They're trying to take your legacy. The waitress came by with refills. Neither of us touched the coffee. I'll need copies of everything, I said. And I want eyes on Quinn. Phone logs, office movement, calls to city developers. If he's planning to offload my IP, I want proof before it leaks. Felix didn't blink. I've already got Tasha on it. She's working inside Quinn's firm now, off books. I'll loop her in directly. And Maris. She's not being subtle anymore. If she thinks you haven't noticed, she's going to keep moving fast. I looked out the window. The city beyond was still and silent. Neon reflections on the empty pavement. I used to look at the skyline and feel pride. Now all I saw was a battlefield. I'm not going to scream, I said quietly. I'm not going to confront her. Not yet. What then? I play the fool, I said. Let them think I'm broken, distracted, vulnerable. Felix gave a slow nod. And in the meantime? In the meantime, I said, sliding the envelope into my coat, I start designing something else. Something surgical. I stood up from the booth, left a 20 on the table. The coffee sat untouched. My legacy was under siege. But they forgot who they were dealing with. I wasn't just a builder. I knew how to demolish, too. The movers came on a Tuesday. I handed off the keys to the old townhouse and took nothing but my books, my drafting tablet, and a few pieces of furniture I actually liked. The rest, photos, gifts from Maris, furniture she picked out, stayed behind. I didn't need any of it. My new place was a loft in the old textile district, a corner unit with exposed brick, mismatched floors, and pipes that moaned in the walls. It used to be a factory warehouse. Now it was home. Publicly, I told everyone I needed space. The firm's inner circle assumed I was burned out. I didn't correct them. Rumors moved faster than facts, and I wanted those rumors to run wild. It didn't take long. I started showing up to meetings late. Sometimes not at all. I'd arrive in jeans, unshaven, with the dazed look of someone who hadn't slept. When I did speak, I mumbled about the divorce or zoning stress. Let them think I was spiraling. The performance was easy. I barely had to try. Even Greta Bell played her part. She was a no-name lawyer on paper. I found her through a mutual contact, an ex-judge who owed me a favor. Greta ran a dusty 2-person office in a half-abandoned building downtown. Her name wasn't on any partner board. No flashy suits. No plaques. She wore corduroy and read depositions out loud to herself like she was testing a new language. But behind that, she was lethal. Let them underestimate me, she said the first time we met. It's more fun that way. So I hired her, publicly and loudly. Let Quinn's spies think I'd handed the most important legal fight of my life to a C-list courthouse regular. Maris served me the divorce papers on a Thursday. She wore a navy blouse, minimal jewelry, and not even a flicker of remorse. She placed the envelope on the coffee table in my loft like it was some passive errand she was running. There's no need to drag it out, she said, sipping from a to-go cup. I think we both know what this is. I nodded like I was too exhausted to argue. Yeah, we're done. She looked around the loft like it offended her. You really moved in here? I like the space, I said. You used to live like an adult. I still do. I just stopped pretending it matters. That made her smile in that way she always did when she thought she had the upper hand. The firm will be part of the discussion, she said, almost kindly. It's community property. Quinn says we can mediate or go to court, but either way, I have a stake. Of course, I said quietly. Whatever you think is fair. She blinked, caught off guard by my agreement. I mean it, I added. Take what you need. I don't care anymore. Maris stood up like the meeting was over. I knew you'd be reasonable. After she left, I stared at the papers for a long time. Then I picked up my phone and called Greta. Time to begin, I said. In the weeks that followed, I leaned hard into the part one was playing. My company's board watched as I drifted through conference calls, sometimes mute, sometimes rambling about irrelevant zoning updates. I fumbled reports. I forgot meetings. I told the press I was considering stepping back. Quinn and Maris couldn't have scripted it better. They began circling like sharks, prepping filings, gathering testimonies from contractors and vendors trying to prove Maris had a significant role in my work. None of it was true, but it didn't have to be. Perception was enough. And that was the point. Let them believe I was weak. Let them move fast and sloppy. Let them think they had already won. Because while they celebrated, I was building something under their feet. I kept Greta out of sight. She worked from back offices and unlisted numbers. We shared documents through encrypted servers. Felix coordinated with Tasha, and together they mapped Quinn's movement patterns, data pulls, and a chain of financial requests that didn't yet know they were being watched. The firm's stock dipped by 6% that month. Someone leaked a memo about leadership uncertainty. I didn't deny it. Let it drop. Let everything fall just far enough to make them bolt. One night, I went to a fundraiser dinner downtown, sat in the back near the kitchen, and nursed a scotch while Maris and Quinn worked the room. She looked radiant, confident. She kissed his cheek at one point and leaned in to whisper something that made him laugh. People smiled at them. Cameras clicked. The golden couple. I caught Felix watching me from across the room. I raised my glass. Let them think the game was over. Because they had no idea what was coming. 2 weeks after the fundraiser, I met Tasha Rook in the back corner of a cafe that specialized in pour-overs and disinterest. She wore her usual nondescript hoodie, her thick glasses fogged slightly from the rain. No one looked twice at her, exactly why she was perfect for this. How deep are you in? I asked, sliding into the booth across from her. She took a slow sip of tea. Quinn thinks I'm a temp. He forgets my name every other day. He's arrogant. Doesn't encrypt anything. I've got access to emails, call logs, and scheduling software. I nodded. Good. Stay invisible. You're not going to like what I found, she said, opening her laptop and tilting it toward me. On the screen, a PDF of an internal briefing memo. The header read, Confidential, Preliminary Sale Plan, Hydra Initiative, David Lenhart Designs. I scanned it. My green infrastructure project? The one I hadn't even finalized specs for. But here it was, my renderings, water table models, impact forecasts, all attached to a memo addressed to 2 international development firms. One in Singapore, one in the UAE. They're shopping your work overseas, Tasha said quietly. Framed as a joint venture through Maris's foundation. I felt the back of my neck heat up. And that's not the worst of it. She pulled up another file, this one a spreadsheet. Dozens of transactions, all tagged under Civic Growth Fund, a city-supported nonprofit that Maris chaired for the past 2 years. The fund was supposed to support affordable housing and green public space. Instead, it had paid out to companies that didn't exist. Or rather, companies that only existed on paper. Ones with names like Crescent Development Logistics and Urban Trail Consulting. Shells. All linked back to Quinn. They were laundering money. Using a civic foundation as cover. City money. My project's funding. They're bleeding the city while they pitch your designs as their own, Tasha said. And if they land the deal with Singapore, the buyout alone would be worth 10 times your annual revenue. I leaned back in the booth, trying not to show anything on my face. She lowered her voice. I've got about 60% of the paper trail. But there's more hidden in hard files Quinn keeps in his downtown office. That's where your leverage is. And we need someone to get to it, I said. She gave a small smile. Already found him. Later that week, I met with Quinn's junior partner, Simon Locke. Late 30s, always sweating, and looked like the kind of guy who bet on minor league baseball. He owed the wrong people too much money. Felix had found him. In a dark parking garage, Simon paced while I stood still. Legal immunity? He asked, scratching his neck. I want it in writing. You'll get it, I said. You just need to do one thing. He looked at me. Nervous. Desperate. What? Open Quinn's cabinet on Friday night. Take copies of everything in the red folders marked Grants, Foundation, or INTL JV. We'll do the rest. He hesitated. You don't understand. If Quinn finds out. He won't, I cut in. Because you're going to drop the flash drive anonymously. No contact after. No trail. He swallowed hard. I want out of this after. All of it. Witness protection if it goes bad. I nodded. Fine. Felix stepped out from the shadows to hand him the burner phone and the drive. You'll use this. Nothing else? We'll know if you try anything stupid. Simon took it like it weighed 100 pounds. He did it. By Sunday morning, Tasha and Felix were in my loft with me, flipping through a mess of scanned documents. Emails between Quinn and city contractors. Undisclosed meetings with foreign buyers. Even coded notes on bribes and commission percentages. This, Tasha said, holding up a folder, is your silver bullet. He wrote down the judge's name. Judge Halsey. Same one Felix had flagged earlier. He's taking payments, she said. In kind, Maris's charity threw a gala that covered a renovation on the judge's vacation home. He listed it as a silent donation. We sat in silence for a moment. The entire house of cards was in front of us. Fraud, bribery, embezzlement, public corruption. They were going to burn your legacy, Felix said. Turn it into a story about betrayal and mental instability. Use the city's own money to steal your firm and sell it abroad. Not anymore. I looked out the window, the skyline blinking with quiet lights. We keep the act going, I said. Maris still thinks I'm lost. Quinn thinks they've got it all under control. Tasha nodded. We have everything we need. Not yet, I said. Next, we bring it to court. Because if they wanted to play this out in public, then that's exactly where I'd bury them. The courtroom smelled like fresh polish and old ambition. Rows of clean wood benches, pale marble floors, and a dozen journalists tucked in the back pretending not to record anything. This wasn't just a divorce hearing anymore. Not with my name, not with my firm's notoriety. The city was watching. Investors were watching. And Maris knew it. She walked in wearing white. Not off-white. Not beige. Pure white. It was deliberate. A calculated performance, meant to conjure innocence and class, like she was the aggrieved party. The poor, patient wife of a brilliant but unstable architect. She gave a gracious nod to the judge, Halsey, as expected, then smiled softly at the crowd like this was a press conference instead of litigation. Quinn sat beside her, looking like the smug corporate shark he'd always been. Double-breasted suit, silver pen, highlighted documents stacked with military precision. Greta Bell shuffled in behind me. No fanfare. No briefcase. She wore a blazer with a coffee stain on the sleeve and carried her notes in a plastic grocery bag. We took our seats at the defense table. People stared at her like she was lost. That was the point. Judge Halsey adjusted his glasses. Let's proceed. Quinn stood, cleared his throat, and started with a speech that sounded rehearsed to the syllable. Your Honor, the evidence will show that my client, Mrs. Maris Linhart, played a pivotal and sustained role in the success of David Linhart's architectural ventures. Not only in emotional and domestic support, but in tangible, documentable strategic contributions. Design revisions, developer introductions, grant negotiations. I looked down, pretending to fidget. Quinn continued, we will demonstrate that Mrs. Linhart is owed not just half of the marriage's financial estate, but also partial control of Linhart Design Group's proprietary intellectual property, blueprints, patents, and in-development urban plans. It is our belief that this is both a legal and moral certainty. The judge nodded thoughtfully. Noted. Then it was Greta's turn. She stood slowly. No theatrics. No flourish. She didn't object. Didn't argue. We're not contesting community property, she said, her voice dry and even. Mr. Linhart is prepared to offer Mrs. Linhart her fair share. Quinn blinked, then smiled. The trap was working. For the next week, we sat through depositions and witness statements. Quinn paraded in contractors, city clerks, even one of my former interns who claimed Maris had helped coordinate proposals. All coached, all rehearsed. Halsey accepted it all without question, barely glancing at Greta's half-hearted cross-examinations. We let it all in. I didn't contest Maris's motion to access firm assets, so the judge granted her temporary management rights over several pending projects. A test balloon to gauge her capability. She pretended to be surprised. Oh, that's generous, she said, touching her chest lightly. My design team texted me in panic. Maris was scheduling client meetings, promising redesigns, and leaking press quotes about ushering in a new chapter for the firm. My firm. Let her. Because behind the scenes, we weren't idle. Tasha had hired a digital forensics specialist to extract embedded metadata from Quinn's internal files. Felix kept quiet tabs on Quinn's travel records, uncovering a recent trip to D.C. where he'd tried to initiate a private meeting with a Department of Housing liaison. The pieces were lining up. But in court, we played weak. Greta stuttered when addressing the judge. I pretended to mix up dates and forgot what phase my harbor project was in. I arrived late one morning wearing mismatched shoes. Maris looked positively radiant by then. Confident. Triumphant. Quinn leaned over during a break and said just loud enough, "You might want to consider a buyout, David. Retire with dignity. We'll be generous." I stared at him for a beat, then nodded slowly. "I'll think about it." That afternoon, Judge Halsey pushed a decision on firm valuation to the next hearing. Further review required, he said. But it was clear which way the wind was blowing. Greta scribbled something on a yellow pad and handed it to me. 2 more days. That was all it said. Just 2 more days of playing dead. Then we'd bury them alive. By Thursday morning, the clock had run out. Tasha arrived at my loft with a black duffel bag, circles under her eyes, and 40-plus hours of damning evidence. Audio files. Video recordings. Signed documents. Metadata timestamps. She dropped the bag onto my dining table with a quiet thud. "I hope you're ready to end them," she said, rubbing her temples. I flipped open the case. Dozens of labeled flash drives. The centerpiece was a hard drive containing office surveillance Quinn never realized was active, installed during a pre-renovation code upgrade. One camera, forgotten in the overhead lighting grid. Another hidden in a hallway smoke detector. The footage? Crystal clear. Tasha hit play on one clip. Quinn's voice filled the room. "So yeah, the judge is handled. Halsey's got a soft spot for favors. Golf, cash under the table, silent donors to his campaign fund. Maris's charity wrote the check last month. Renovations for his place upstate were finished last week. Then came Maris. Calm. Cold. That should secure the asset shift, right? We freeze the IP, you take over operational control, I sell off what's needed, and David, God bless him, just stumbles off into early retirement with his mood swings and therapy bills." Quinn laughed. "He's broken. Have you seen him? He walks into court like he just woke up on a subway bench." They clinked glasses. Laughed again. I didn't blink. Tasha skipped ahead. "This one's even worse." Quinn again. "Once we offload the harbor project schematic to the Gulf Syndicate, we get a 10-point kicker on the back end. Offshore accounts are ready. Cayman. Dubai. She'll run it through that shell company. What's it called? Shorelink Partners." Then a soft whisper. "Maris again. You're sure we're clear on the grant money? The civic fund stuff?" "Totally. It's all filtered through third-party invoices. Nobody's looking that deep. And even if they do, we blame the accountant or the board." Tasha stopped the video. I exhaled through my nose. "And the judge?" "Oh, he's done," Felix said, walking in with 2 coffees. "We traced 3 different payments from shell accounts tied to the Civic Growth Fund, each funneled to contractors who worked on Halsey's vacation house. That silent gala donation covered the rest." He handed me a folder. "Plus," he added, "we flipped the last piece." I raised an eyebrow. "Maris's brother," he said. "Paul. You remember him?" I nodded slowly. "Quiet guy. Kept out of family drama. Never really liked me, never really didn't. Just there. He found out Maris froze him out of the family inheritance trust last year. We showed him the right receipts, how she used foundation funds to lease a property in his name, then liquidated it." He snapped, handed over an entire folder of backup documents he found at their family's rural estate. "What kind of documents?" "Financials, communications between Quinn and developers," and Felix smiled, "an audio diary. Maris talking to herself on her phone, practicing her statements for court." He tapped the final flash drive. She said, and I quote, "David will fall apart once we gut his firm. That's the beauty of this. He won't fight back. He doesn't know how." Greta showed up just after noon. She reviewed the footage in silence. Took notes. Asked only one question. "You sure this is everything?" Tasha nodded. "Everything that matters." "Then it's time," she said. That night, Felix submitted an anonymous tip to the IRS using flagged offshore routing numbers tied to Maris and Quinn's dummy companies. The Civic Growth Fund got added to the report. Wire fraud. Misappropriation of public grants. Foreign financial transfers without disclosures. A second report went to the FBI, complete with Quinn's recorded conversations about bribery, laundering, and the Harbor Project's international sale. The last package was for the State Bar Association. Greta hand-delivered it. All the while, Maris and Quinn carried on like emperors. They had no idea what was coming. They didn't know that Quinn's junior partner, Simon, had provided sworn testimony, including copies of the falsified grant applications. They didn't know Tasha had emailed all the recorded clips to Greta's encrypted drive with a timestamp log chain that could survive any cross-examination. They didn't know Judge Halsey's calendar had just been flagged by internal affairs. And they certainly didn't know that the man they'd called broken, naive, and easy to manipulate had been quietly, patiently, and systematically dismantling their empire one wire transfer at a time. Felix looked at me across the loft as we finished labeling the final batch of exhibits. "You good?" he asked. "Better than good," I said, sealing the evidence back. "Tomorrow." I nodded. "Tomorrow, we stopped pretending." Because the charade was over. It was time for court. The courthouse lobby was already buzzing when I walked in. Reporters hovered near the security checkpoint, whispering and jostling for position. Someone snapped a photo of me as I passed through the metal detector. I didn't flinch. I was done hiding. Maris and Quinn were already inside when I entered the courtroom. She was draped in an ivory blazer, sleek hair pulled into a professional twist. Quinn leaned back in his chair like he owned the place, flipping through pages in a trial binder with that signature smugness carved into his face. Greta sat beside me, calm as ever, chewing on a peppermint and scribbling something onto a legal pad. No grocery bag today. No mismatched clothes. Just a clean navy suit and a faint smile. Judge Halsey entered, straightening his robe with a tug as he Saturday. "Let's move to closing arguments," he said, already sounding bored. Quinn rose confidently. He started pacing, speaking to the jury like they were old friends. "David Lenhart is a brilliant man. No one questions that," he began. "But brilliance does not negate the contributions of others. My client, Mrs. Lenhart, supported her husband's ventures with her time, her insight, and her influence. She deserves her share of what they built together." He turned toward the judge. "Your Honor, we believe the evidence is clear. Mrs. Lenhart was not just a partner in marriage, but a partner in business. She contributed. She earned her stake. And as such, she is entitled to equal ownership of Lenhart Design Group's assets, including intellectual property, accounts, and projects in development." Halsey nodded slowly. "Thank you, Mr. Quinn." Quinn returned to his seat with the same look you see on a man cashing a winning ticket. "Miss Bell," the judge said, adjusting his glasses. Greta stood up, casually brushing her sleeve. "Your Honor," she said, "I'd like to submit a late exhibit into evidence." Quinn immediately stood. "Objection. This is highly irregular. We've completed discovery." The judge cut him off. "Relax, counselor. What kind of exhibit?" Greta didn't flinch. "A series of audio and video files, labeled Exhibits G through Z, accompanied by sworn statements from a whistleblower inside Mr. Quinn's law firm, a forensic analyst, and a financial witness tied to the Civic Growth Fund." The courtroom murmured. Quinn stiffened. Maris's expression faltered, just slightly. Judge Halsey narrowed his eyes. "On what grounds?" "On the grounds of criminal misconduct. Fraud. Perjury. Bribery," Greta said smoothly. "And obstruction of justice, by the plaintiff, her attorney, and, potentially, Your Honor." The room went dead silent. Greta handed over a thick binder and 2 flash drives. "Play Exhibit G, please," she said to the clerk. The courtroom monitors lit up. The first clip showed Quinn's office, grainy but clear. Maris sat across from him, legs crossed, swirling a glass of wine. Quinn's voice played loud and sharp. "David won't fight back. We just bleed the IP, sell it offshore, and let him collapse under the stress." Gasps rippled through the gallery. "Exhibit H," Greta said. A new clip. A different angle. Quinn leaned against his desk, chuckling. "Halsey's locked. That gala? Renovated his whole lake house. Paid in full quietly, of course. Exhibit I." Maris's voice this time. "He's too proud to suspect anything. Let him sink. We take the firm and disappear." Judge Halsey's face went pale. "Exhibit J through P are recordings of their meetings with international buyers," Greta continued. "Q through T are files linking Civic Growth Fund grants to personal bank accounts belonging to Mrs. Lenhart. U through W document Mr. Quinn's shell corporations and offshore transfers. And Exhibit X is a sworn deposition from a junior partner at Quinn's firm confirming that these actions were coordinated with the intent to defraud." She took a step forward. "Exhibit Y includes a full financial timeline with traced fund movement. And Exhibit Z," she paused, "contains audio of this court's presiding judge discussing how to tilt proceedings in favor of a preferred party." All eyes turned to Judge Halsey. He didn't speak. The bailiff glanced at him, then toward the monitors, then back again. There was a long, awful silence. Finally, the judge cleared his throat. Court will recess immediately. But the doors at the back of the courtroom opened before he could finish. Two federal agents stepped in. One showed his badge. Judge Halsey, you are being placed under investigation by order of the State Ethics Commission and the Office of the Inspector General. Please come with us. Halsey's mouth opened, then closed. The room erupted into whispers, some people half standing in shock. Quinn stood up sharply. This is a farce. This is illegal. The second agent turned to him. Mr. Quinn, you are also under investigation. Please remain seated. Quinn didn't. He tried to speak again, but two more agents appeared and flanked him before he could move. Maris went white as chalk. The judge was escorted out first. Then Quinn. Then the agents turned toward Maris. She stood frozen, clutching the edge of the table. You can't do this, she said, her voice barely audible. This isn't real. Greta walked over and gently laid a copy of the signed transfer paperwork, IP rights, project ownership, the entirety of my firm's protected holdings right in front of her. This is real, she said. You signed it. You tried to steal it. And now it's gone. Maris looked up at me, eyes wide, searching for some flicker of emotion. I gave her nothing. Greta turned to the stunned gallery. My client, Mr. Linhart, formally requests that all remaining divorce proceedings be frozen until the outcome of federal investigations are complete, and that the court issue a restraining order barring Mrs. Linhart and any associated parties from accessing Linhart Design Group properties, accounts, or personnel. The new judge, summoned hastily from chambers, nodded. Motion granted. Greta sat back down beside me and whispered, checkmate. I didn't move. Maris was still staring at me, lips parted like she couldn't figure out what had just happened. The same woman who once stood on stage with me when the city awarded our firm the Harbor Renewal Initiative was now being escorted out by agents. Not in handcuffs. Not yet. But it was coming. The curtain had dropped. The actors were exposed. And the house, every last brick of their betrayal, was crumbling around them. The headlines hit less than 24 hours later. City real estate attorney arrested in fraud, bribery scandal. Civic Growth Fund under federal investigation. Judge Halsey steps down amid ethics probe. It was everywhere, local news, national finance blogs, even an architecture podcast that usually only talked about cantilevers and zoning policy. This time, they were talking about me. But I didn't do interviews. I didn't go on camera. I let the evidence speak. Quinn was indicted first, wire fraud, conspiracy, obstruction of justice, and accepting bribes while engaging in undeclared foreign commerce. He was denied bail. The feds argued he was a flight risk. Maris followed soon after. The charges were less dramatic but just as damning: embezzlement, civic grant fraud, and perjury. The foundation she'd chaired, the one she'd flaunted at cocktail galas and ribbon-cutting ceremonies, had been gutted from the inside. Every public dollar redirected to shell accounts, funneled through consulting expenses and inflated invoices. Her donors turned on her fast. By the end of the week, half a dozen local philanthropists filed lawsuits seeking restitution. The city council held an emergency press conference denouncing her foundation. The mayor, someone I'd worked with on several community projects, called me personally. I just wanted to say, she said, you did the right thing. And you did it clean. I thanked her and said nothing more. Judge Halsey resigned 2 days later. No statements. No farewell. Just a quiet press release and a promise to cooperate with ongoing investigations. His vacation home was already listed on the market by the end of the week. It wasn't just vindication. It was clarity. All the shadows, all the whispers, all the ways I'd been made to feel unstable, uncertain, paranoid, they were gone now. Replaced by facts. Charges. Proof. Linhart Design Group, the firm I'd built from the ground up, went from scandal-scarred to celebrated almost overnight. Clients who had paused deals came back with interest. My inbox filled with invitations to speak at urban planning panels and green infrastructure symposiums. Investors who'd once tiptoed around the Quinn rumors now sent proposals by the dozen. The Harbor project, the one they tried to steal, was greenlit for Phase 3. The city council moved the timeline forward, citing renewed trust and transparent civic development. But the biggest reveal? Greta Bell. After the courtroom implosion, I asked her, half-jokingly, why she'd ever agreed to take my case. She smiled and slid an old federal ID across the table. I was a prosecutor for 11 years, she said, specialized in public fraud and white-collar corruption. I took early retirement after a personal case went south. And now? I asked. Now I consult. Quietly. And I pick my targets. She looked at me with a steadiness that made sense now. She'd never been a C-list lawyer. She'd been hunting. You picked a good one, I said. No, she corrected. I picked a worthy one. We shook hands. No contracts. No invoices. Just mutual respect between two people who understood the long game. The final loose ends tied themselves off. Simon Locke, the disgruntled junior partner, entered protective custody and became the state's key witness. His testimony helped seal Quinn's fate. Tasha took a new job as head of analytics for a civic tech nonprofit, funded, partially, by a donation from Linhart Design Group. Felix? He went back to being my best friend, though now with a full-time security clearance and a seat on my firm's advisory board. We met one night overlooking the harbor, the wind kicking up off the water. Remember when we thought zoning law was the most corrupt thing we'd ever deal with, he asked. I chuckled. Turns out betrayal's a little messier. But we won, he said. I shook my head. No, we endured. Winning's not the point anymore. He raised his coffee. Still feels like justice. I clinked mine against his. Justice with interest. The skyline shimmered in front of us. Rebuilt. Untouched. Mine again. A few weeks later, I found myself driving through the revitalized harbor just after sunrise. The streets were still quiet, the waterfront still stretching wide like a canvas. Joggers passed in pairs. A few fishermen stood motionless on the pier. The city was breathing easy again. So was I. It had been months since the first betrayal. Since that grainy video in Quinn's lobby cracked the illusion of my marriage and everything I thought I had built with Maris. The wreckage had been brutal. But now, in the stillness of morning, the silence felt earned. Like an old scar that didn't hurt anymore, just reminded me that I healed. My phone buzzed on the passenger seat. A message from Tasha. FYI, Quinn tried to flip on Maris. Claimed she orchestrated the foundation fraud solo. FBI caught him bluffing. Idiot forgot his voice was on half the files. I stared at the text for a second, then smiled to myself. Not out of pettiness. Just relief. Quinn had always been the kind of man who thought charm was strategy. That if he smirked at the right time and said the right legalese, he could twist his way out of any corner. But his corner had collapsed. His deals exposed. His reputation burnt down to the studs. Tasha had stayed on top of the legal threads even after Greta stepped away. She said she wasn't doing it for me, just hated loose ends. I believed her. I pulled over near the edge of the harbor. Got out. Leaned against the rail. The skyline stood like a familiar friend now. Strong. Tall. Untouchable. That's when I got the second message. Felix again. Maris's charity donors are suing for fraud. Some want criminal charges. Her social circles vanished. She tried showing up to a gala, got turned away at the door. Poetic. She'd always lived for that world. The curated parties. The exclusive events. The kind of company that judged success by tailoring and guest lists. But none of them wanted anything to do with her now. Not after the truth came out. And me? I got my name back. My firm. My reputation. My city. I declined all the interview requests. Every article that wanted a hero angle. Every talk show looking for a redemption arc. I didn't want it. I didn't want to be a symbol. I just wanted to work. Justice had already been served. I had no appetite for a victory lap. I'd spent too much time under someone else's spotlight, letting others frame the story. Now, I just wanted peace. Focus. A life with clean lines and no hidden corners. Back at the car, I let the engine idle for a moment, looking out at the steel and glass rising from the city's bones. These streets had been my canvas for years. My projects were part of the city's new breath. And now, for the first time in a long time, I felt like I belonged here again. Not as a husband. Not as a victim. Just as myself. As I drove off, I passed the sign outside the Harbor Commission building, one of my early proposals carved into steel and concrete. I'd nearly forgotten it was there. Resilience is not resistance. It is the art of rebuilding anyway. Maris would never understand that. But I did. And I always would. The land sat quiet for a long time. It was a jagged plot on the edge of the riverfront, once overgrown and forgotten, later at the center of Quinn and Maris's scheme. They had tried to sell it to a foreign developer using my designs. Green infrastructure zones, modular spaces, drainage smart systems tailored for rising water levels. The work of 5 years. My future. Now it was mine again. Cleared, reclaimed, and ready. Construction broke ground a month after the court finalized the asset returns. I didn't hold a press event. There were no ceremonial shovels, No photographers snapping the first dig. Just a backhoe, a crew I trusted, and blueprints that still had coffee stains on the corners from all the nights I stayed up reworking the angles. At the heart of the plan was a community center, multi-use, free to the public, designed for families, teens, the elderly, anyone who needed a place to sit, gather, or just exist with dignity. Classrooms, green roofs, recycled water systems. A solar array on the roof, shaped like an open hand. We broke concrete and set steel. Day by day it rose. On the outer foundation, etched into the concrete slab beneath the main entryway, I added one thing. A quote. Not a dedication. Not a name. Just words. Betrayal has a cost. Integrity has roots. Nobody asked where it came from. The construction crew didn't care. But I stood over it the day it dried, hands in my pockets, watching as the letters hardened into permanence. That quote had followed me through this whole mess. It lived in every plan they tried to steal, every dollar they siphoned, every lie they told. And now, it lived in stone. Not as revenge, as record. I didn't want to build monuments to pain. I wanted to build something better out of it. Something no one could take from me, because it wasn't about me anymore. As the sun dipped low behind the scaffolding, casting long shadows across the job site, I looked out over the city. This time, no bitterness clung to the back of my throat. No need to explain, defend, or prove. I had done that already. This project wasn't a comeback. It was a continuation. I smiled, not like a man who had won, but like a man who had survived, rebuilt, and finally stood on solid ground again, with nothing left to hide.